From this tutorial, we will start the advanced topic of JavaScript. We will start from the object. In previous lectures, we understand the basic of object and how to declare an object with properties. If you want to watch that video first, then you can watch that video from the top right corner of the screen. After you watch this video, you will understand how to declare an object and how to access object properties. But now, from this tutorial, we will dive deep into JavaScript and learn the advanced topic of JavaScript. So we will first quickly look at what is object and how to declare them, and then we will take a closer look at a difference between array and object. As I said in the previous lectures, object is a container in JavaScript which contains properties. You can also call them aggregate or a complex data type. To declare an object, you need to specify curly braces. Let's understand how to declare an object. So we will just overview the object video first. So we'll just create an object here. So I will just say constant obj is equal to, and in the curly braces we will specify object properties. So when you are creating an object, you need to specify curly braces. So in these curly braces, we will specify a first property, name, string, and value 45. Now the first property is type of string and the second property value is type of number. You can put function also in the properties. We had learned that in the previous lectures. So now let's understand what is the difference between array and object. In the previous lecture, I asked question, what is the type of array? The answer is object. That is why we need to understand the difference between an object, because array is also type of object. Now, the object have two primary difference from array. The big difference between object and array is this. When you create an array, it contains value indexed numerically. So if you wanted to access an array element, then you need to specify array index. Whereas when you're using object, it contains properties indexed by string or symbol. So if you wanted to access an object properties, then you can't use index values. The object property can access with the property string or symbol. The second biggest difference is array are ordered using index number. It means the zero index comes before the first index, whereas object doesn't have this limitation. In the object, it is not guaranteed that object.a has come before the object.b property. Right? Now this difference is quite confidential. Then what makes object more important than an array? In this advanced tutorial series, you will completely get understand why we need to understand object, because objects are everywhere in JavaScript. Now let's create an object and print all properties on the console. Suppose if you have this type of object which has multiple properties like this, so I will just say constant obj is equal to, and we'll specify some properties. So we'll just say f1 hello, f2 everyone, f3 welcome, f4 back to, and f5 daily tuition. Now if you wanted to print all the properties on the console, then what would you do? Do you access all the property one by one to print on the console, or anything else? Let me show you the best way to print all these properties on the console. If you are thinking to use control flow statement, then you are right. The best way to print all the properties of the object using for in loop, like this. So I will just create a for in loop here. So I will just say for, and in the parenthesis I will create a let f in object, right? So I will just specify obj here, and in the block I will just print f, right? So this will print all the properties on the console. As simple as that. If you had the same idea to print object properties on the console, then you are very clever. If you are properly following all the JavaScript tutorials from the start, then this is not a very big deal for you to print all these properties on the console, right? In this tutorial, we will take a closer look at OOP. we will briefly understand what is OOP stands for and what is the use of OOP in JavaScript. Don't forget to watch the complete video because it is very helpful to you. OOP stands for Object-Oriented Programming. To understand object-oriented programming, we need to first understand what is object. Object is a simple, unordered collection of properties, each of which has a name and value. Object can aggregate multiple values and allows you to store and access that values by property name. Property name can be a string or a symbol. In the previous video, we learned how to declare an object and enumerate its properties on the console. Now, we will understand what is the use of object in object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming is a very important aspect in every programming language. I really hope that you carefully listen all the instruction and understand what is object-oriented programming. In object-oriented programming, object is a logically related collection of data and functionality. Now, this object can be a collection of properties and methods. Using the real-world example, you will completely understand how the object is really created. Now, let's assume that object is a car, and a car has multiple parts and functionalities. Now here, we will assume car parts as properties and functionality as methods. It means if the car has a model number, number of doors, glasses, number of wheels, these all parts are properties of the car object, whereas open door, accelerate, turn on headlights and every functionality of the car are methods of car objects. Now this piece of information will complete the car. It means when you combine car properties and methods, then you will get your complete usable car. So now the object also have the same similarity like car. Using properties, you can specify object part, and using methods, you can specify object functionality. Now, you know that to build a complete car, you will need properties and methods, right? Now here, I also wanted to introduce one more important topic is you can access object reference anytime using reference. It means when you specify your object reference to the other variable, then you can modify this object using the reference variable. Using the example, you will understand what I want to say. Suppose I have an object and you have a reference of that object in the variable like this. If I just declare an empty object here, so I will just say constant obj and I will just specify curly braces here, and this is my empty object. And if I create a reference of this object, so I will just say constant y is equal to object, then I can create properties of this object using this reference. So if I just say y dot d is equal to, and in the double quote I will say property created using reference, right? And when I print this on the console, so if I just say console.log and say obj.d, then you will see the property of object is created. So when you execute this statement, you can see your object has a one property created using the reference variable, right? There is a lot more thing to understand and we will cover everything one by one. I hope you will have understood the meaning of object-oriented programming. If not, then don't worry, using future tutorials, you will completely understand what it is. Don't forget to watch the next tutorial because the next tutorial depends on this tutorial. That's it. That is all for this tutorial. In this tutorial, we will take a closer look at class. We will understand how to create a class in JavaScript and how to use it. In the previous lecture, we learned what is object-oriented programming. Now in this lecture, we will explore a new topic, class. Prior to ECMAScript 6, creating a class is very fuzzy. ECMAScript 6 comes with the new convenient syntax of class, like this: class, model. So the model is the name of my class, and then I will specify curly braces, and in this curly braces I will say constructor parenthesis and the body of the constructor, right? This syntax create a new class model. So when you want to access model class, then you need to create an instance of the class. No instance has been created yet. So we need to create a class instance first to access class properties and methods. To create a class instance, we will just say constant obj1 is equal to, and just specify a new keyword and say model and specify parenthesis. So here we have created a new instance of the class, right? You can create multiple instances of the same class just like this. So I will just say constant obj2 is equal to new model, right? So obj1 and obj2 are two different instances of the same class. So now we have two instances of the model class. When you creating an instance of the class, you need to use a new keyword. A new keyword will create a new instance of the class. Now using obj1 and obj2, you can access object properties and methods. We did not created any properties and methods yet, but we will look at them after a few minutes. But first, before we make the class sophisticated, I wanted to introduce you an instance of keyword which tells you that which instance belongs to which class. Now if you wanted to find out about which instance belongs to which class, then an instance of keyword help you out. For example, suppose you have a obj1 instance of the model class, and if you want to know does obj1 instance of the model class, then you can find out the answer using this. So I will just say obj1 instance of, so this is the keyword, so I will just say instance of without any space and then specify my class name. So when you execute this, you will get true because obj1 is instance of a model class. And what if I change the class? So if I just change the model class and say array here, then you will get false, right? Because array is not an instance of a class. As I said in the previous lectures, you can create properties and methods of the class. Now let's make this class more interesting. So here I will just explore the class. In the constructor, I will specify two parameters. So I will just say m number, which is model number, and then I will say m name, which means model name, right? And just after that I will say this dot m number is equal to m number, and then I will say this dot m name is equal to m name. So this dot m number and this dot m name is object properties, and we are assigning the value to the object property using the constructor parameter. We will discuss this after a few minutes. Just after that, after the constructor completed, we will just create a method. So we'll just say show and then specify parenthesis. Just after that, specify curly braces, and in this method I will just say console.log, and using the backtick I will say model number, this dot m number, and model name, this dot m name, right? And just after that I will just say constant obj1. Now here we have created an object instance, so we just need to specify parameter for this object to access class properties and methods, right? So we will first wanted to initialize the class properties. To initialize class property, we just need to specify parameter for this class. So I will just say 550, and the name of my model number is BMW. So the first parameter is refers to the model number, and the second parameter refers to the model name. So both these value assigned to the class properties model number and model name, right? Just after that, I will call my show method. So I will just say obj1.show and just specify parentheses, right? So I just wanted to explain what we had done here. Now the constructor is used to initialize class properties. Constructor is a method which invoke when the class instance is created. So when you create an instance of the class, you need to specify parameter if you created constructor with the argument. So here in this example, we had created constructor with 2 arguments. So in the constructor, we had specified 2 arguments when we created an instance of this class, right? So we need to specify argument value when we create instance of the class. After that, in the constructor, we had used this keyword. Now here, the this keyword refers to the instance of the object. In the constructor, we created 2 properties of the model class using this keyword. In the previous lecture, we learned how to create a property using an instance. So here we are using this keyword to create a new property of the class. So this keyword refers to the instance of the class, right? After that, we have created show method. To create a method in the class, you just need to specify method name with parentheses and just after that specify curly braces and the body of your method. Method is just like a function. Method is created for adding functionality to your class, right? So when you execute this, you will get your model number and your model name on the console, right? So using the class, you can solve any problem in programming. It is very important to understand how to create a class and how to use it. In this tutorial, we will talk about prototype. We will understand what is prototype is and how to use a prototype in ECMAScript 6. So let's understand what is prototype. When you are referring to a method that are available an instance of the class, you are referring to prototype method. Prototype perform dynamic dispatch using the prototype gen. Every function has a special property prototype. For regular function, prototype isn't used, but it is critically important for function that act as constructor. Using this example, you will understand how to create a function which act as a constructor. So we will just take a very simple example. So I will just write this example first and explain what we had done. So I will just say let f is equal to, and I will create a function here. And in this function, we create 2 properties using this keyword. So I will just say this dot a is equal to 1. Then we'll create the second property, this dot b is equal to 2. And just after that, I will create an instance of this function. So I will just say let o is equal to new f, right? And specify parentheses to call this function. And just after that, I will create one more property using the instance. So I will just say o dot d is equal to 5. Now I just wanted to create a prototype properties to this function. So I will just add properties in f functions using prototype. So I will just say f dot prototype dot b is equal to 3. And then I will just say f dot prototype dot c is equal to 4. Now I have created c property here using prototype. So here we created a function and specified a reference of that function in the variable. In this function, we created 2 properties, a and b. We had used this keyword because we are creating an instance of this function using a new keyword. So this function acts as an object. So we specified 2 properties of a and b. Just after that, I had created an instance of this function using new keyword. So this function acts as object constructor. Then we will create a property using instance of an object. So using the prototype, I will create 2 properties, right? So here I have just created B to inherit the B property, and along with that we had created C property also and specified some values. Now the important about the prototype is a mechanism called dynamic dispatch. But what is a dynamic dispatch is? Well, when you wanted to access any property or method of the object, if it doesn't exist, then JavaScript will check object prototype to see if it exists there. Then if the prototype exists there, then the JavaScript will use that prototype property. I will show you how it's works. So if I just print object properties on the console, then you will get very interesting output. So if I just say console.log and print o.a, so I will just print my first property, and I just wanted to print my all property here. So I will just copy and paste it here and just change o.b, o.c and o.d, right? So on the console you will get 1, 2, 4 and 5, right? So now here you can see the B property is not inherited using the prototype, because the JavaScript will first check if the B property is available in the function or not. If it is available, then the JavaScript will print the B property on the console. If the B property doesn't exist, then the JavaScript will print prototype value, right? So if I just comment here to the B property and run this program again, then you will get 3 on the console. Now here the JavaScript use the prototype B property, right? We are using 3 object properties and 1 prototype. So here property A, B and D is its own property of the object, and property C is the prototype of an object. Now let's print object on the console. So if I just print this object on the console, so I will just say console.log and print O, then you will see your object properties. When you click on this little icon, you can see your prototype properties. Just click on this proto property of the prototype method, and here you can see your prototype properties. The prototype property is invisible, just like this. If you wanted to call the f function, then you will say console.log and say f here. Now I will just print the reference of the function on the console, so I had just specified f here. So when I execute this, I will get my function on the console. Now here the prototype method is invisible. The same statement you can write with the prototype method also. So I will just say console.log f.prototype, right? Now here you can get your properties and the constructor function. Both statements are same. In the first statement, the prototype is invisible. Both statements return the same properties. And using the second statement, which has a prototype method, return the constructor function, right? There is a lot more to learn in prototype, but taking too much detail of prototype will overwhelming for you. So we will cover the prototype in the future lectures. In this tutorial, we will talk about static methods. In this tutorial, you will understand what is static method is and where you can use it. So let's get started. Static methods are declared with the static keyword. So whenever you want to declare a static method, you need to specify static before any method declaration. Static methods are declared with the static keyword followed by the name of your method. Static methods cannot called on instance of a class. It means you can't access static methods using the instance of a class. In the class declaration lecture, we had learned how to create an instance of a class and access properties and methods. But when you are declaring a static method, you can't access it using instance of a class. Instead, static methods are called using the class itself. So whenever you wanted to call a static method, you need to call class itself. right? Static methods are mostly used to create utility functions. We will understand what is utility function in future lectures. But just for now, consider the following example. So I will just create a class here with a static method. So I will just say class. We will name this class static class method. Specify curly braces. And then in this class I will create a static method. So I will say static on call. This is my name of my static method, and specify curly braces here. And in the body of the static method I will return a message. So I will say return, this is a static method, right? Just after that I will just create an instance of a class. I just wanted to show you when we will call the static method using the instant, what will happen, right? So I will just create an instance, constant st is equal to new static class method, right? And specify parenthesis. Just after that I will say console.log and call the static method using the instance. So I will just say st.onCall, right? So when you execute this, you will get st.onCall is not a function. This is the error message, right? You will get error message because, as I said earlier, static methods are called using the class name itself, right? So if you wanted to call the static method, you need to specify your class name dot your method name, like this. So I will just get rid of this statement and say console.log static class method dot on call, right? So using the class name we will call the static method. So now when you execute this statement, you will get your message on the console. So you will get this is a static method on the console, right? If you wanted to call any other static method in the static method, then you can use this keyword also. So this keyword bound to the class itself, just like this. So if I just create one more static method here, so I will just say static on call 2, and here I will just return a first static method and a message. So using the backtick, I will just call my first static method using this keyword. So I will just say this dot on call, and just after that I will specify my message. So I will say called using another static method, right? Now here I will just call both static methods using the class name, just like this. So I will just get rid of this first static method, and here I will specify my second static method, which is on call 2. So I will say on call 2 here, right? So when you execute this, you will get this is a static method called using another static method, right? So in this example, I had just used this keyword to call static method. But it's generally considered the best practice to use class name instead of using this keyword, because you can't access static method in the non-static method. So if you wanted to call static method in the non-static method, then you can use constructor property. As I said earlier, you can't access static methods using instance of a class, but now I will show you how you can execute static method using the instance of a class. We are not accessing static method using the instance, but we are executing static method using the instance, right? It means you can execute static method when the instance of a class is created. For example, so I will just first get rid of this second static method, and after that I will create a constructor. We learned when the class instance is created, constructor automatically called, right? So here I will just specify my constructor. So I will just say constructor parenthesis, and in the curly braces I will first call the static method using the class name. So I will just say console.log static class method dot on call, right? So when you execute this, you will get your message on the console. So here, using the instance, we execute the static method. You can do the same thing with another statement also. So I will just comment this statement and say console.log, and here I will say this dot constructor dot on call. So when you execute this, you will get the same outcome, because using the constructor property, you can call static method in the non-static method, right? Now, you don't need to call the static method using the class name. It will automatically call when you create an instance of the class. So here, I just created an instance of a class. We don't need to call the static method using the class name, because it will automatically call when we create an instance of a class, because you know the constructor is called using the instance of a class. So when the constructor is called, the static method automatically executed and print the message on the console, right? In this tutorial, we will talk about inheritance. We will understand what is the use of inheritance in JavaScript and how to use it. So let's get started. So what is inheritance? Inheritance is a mechanism allow us to create new classes on the basis of already existing classes. Using the inheritance, you can create child class of the parent class. Inheritance provides a flexibility to the child class to reuse methods and variables of the parent class. In JavaScript, you can use extends keyword to create the child class on the basis of parent class. Using the extend keyword, you can acquire all the properties, methods and behavior from the inbuilt object as well as the custom object. The date object is the proper example of inbuilt object, and the custom object is that which you will be creating using the class, right? So we will just touch the basic example of inheritance. So for example, suppose you have created a class of person with a first name and last name property. After you deploy this class, you want to add age to the person. But instead of modifying the first parent class, we will create a child class which has an age property with a method which display username and age. In this example, we will create two classes, parent class and a child class. First, we will create person class and specify first name and last name property. And after that, we will create second class which is age and specify age property to this class, right? So let's consider the following example. So I will just first create a class here. So I will just say class person, and in the curly braces, I will create a constructor. You already know that to initialize the class properties, we will use constructor, right? So we'll just say constructor and specify two properties here, fname, comma, lname, right? And I will just initialize these properties with the property value. So I will just say this dot fname is equal to fname and this dot lname is equal to lname, right? So when you specify your constructor values, these values pass to the property. Now just after that, I just wanted to print the username on the console with their age. So I will just say class age, and here I will use extend keyword to extend the parent class and then specify your parent class name. So I will just specify person here, right? Using the extend keyword, you can reuse properties and methods of the parent class. Now just after that, I will specify curly braces, and here I will say constructor and specify one argument. So I will say age here, and just after that, here in this constructor I will call this super method, right? So I will say super parenthesis, and here to the super method, we will specify two parameters: Harry, the first name of my person, and Dim, the last name of my person, right? But first, what is super method and what the super method does? Super method is used to call the parent class constructor. Using super method, you can pass parameter to the parent class constructor and call them. We will call the parent class constructor using super method and specify values to the parameter, right? So this method will call the first parent class constructor, right? Now just after that, I will create age property and specify assignment operator with my parameter variable, right? I just wanted to print the person first name and last name and their age. So I will just create a method here. So I will just say show up. So this is the name of my method, and in this method I will say console.log. I will just first call the first name. So I just wanted to specify this dot fname. I will concatenate this value and specify some space between first name and last name, and then call my last name property. So I will just say this dot lname. Just after that, I will say console.log and specify message. Using the backtick, I will say your age is, and here I will just print my age property. So I will say this dot age. Now you can see here we are accessing the first class properties and the second class properties in the child class. The benefit of the inheritance that you can reuse all the properties and methods in the child class, right? So here you can see we use fname and the last name using only this keyword. We don't need to create any instance of the class and anything, right? Now just after that, using the child instance, you can call any property and method of the parent class. This is very important. Now inheritance will help you to call all the properties and methods of the parent class using the child class instance, just like this. So here I will just say constant d is equal to new age, right? So here we are not creating a person class instance, we are creating an age class instance here, right? Now here I will just specify the parenthesis and specify 23 here. So this is my age. Just after that, I will call the showUp method using the instance. So I will say d dot showUp and specify parenthesis, right? So when you execute this, you will get your person name, first name and last name and their age. If you wanted to print person name on the console, then you can do that using the child class instance also, like this. So I will just say console.log d.fname. So here you can see we are accessing the parent class property using the child class instance, right? This will print the first name on the console, right? Now if you are not using inheritance and if you are just using the two separate classes without using any extend word, without using any inheritance, then you cannot access any properties and methods of the class without specifying its instance. In this tutorial, we will learn prototype inheritance. In the previous lecture, we learned the class inheritance. Now we will take a brief look at prototype inheritance. In the previous lectures, we had learned what is prototype, and in that video, we had learned a small example which tells you how to create a prototype. If you don't know what is prototype is, then you can watch that video first and move on with this tutorial. Well, you know that object have a special hidden property prototype, and JavaScript will access this property if the property and method does not exist. Suppose you specify a property to the object and want to access that property. If this property does not exist, then the JavaScript will move to the prototype and search for that property. You had learned this in the prototype tutorial, right? Using this example, we will understand the complete concept behind the prototype inheritance Inheritance provides a reusability of properties and methods of existing objects. In the previous video, we learned the class-based inheritance. Now in this tutorial, we will understand prototype inheritance. To set the prototype, you need to specify prototype property proto. Using the proto property, you can set and get properties and methods of the prototype. Let's consider the following example. So if I just create an object here, so I will just let car is equal to, and here we specify two properties, wheel 4 and model Tesla. And after that I will create bike object here, so I will just let bike is equal to, and here we just specify only one property, so I will just say cc 250, right? Now just after that I will just specify prototype property of the bike object, so I will just say bike dot, and here I will call the proto property, so you just need to specify underscore 2 times and say proto here, and then again specify underscore, right? And I will just print the bike object on the console. Let me show you the prototype property first. Here is your prototype property. Now let's access object properties and print on the console. So if you wanted to access bike property, then you can just say console.log bike.cc, right? Using this statement, you can access your bike property. Now you know that you can access object properties and methods using object name. But what if I say you can access the car object using the bike object also? Yes, you heard it right. You can access all the properties and methods of the car object using the bike object. Like this. So if I just say here console.log and say bike.wheel, and then I will just say bike.model, then this is not an invalid statement. If you are wondering how does this happen, then let me tell you that we had specified a prototype property of the bike object. So when the JavaScript executes this statement, JavaScript will first check the object own properties. If he does not find any existing properties there, then the JavaScript will look at the proto property of the bike object and utilize it. Now here you can say car is a prototype of a bike object, and you can also say bike prototypically inherit the car object. So if car has more than 2 useful properties and methods, then you can access all of these properties and methods using bike object. So these properties are automatically available for the bike object. Such properties are called inherited, right? If you have a method in car object, then this method would be available to the bike object also, like this. So if I just create a method here in the car object, so I will just specify comma here and say show. So this is the name of my method, and here I will just say console.log and specify a message. So I will just use backtick and say car model this dot model and specify comma here and say have this dot wheels and say wheel here, right? Now using the bike object, you can access this method. So I will just say bike dot show and specify parenthesis to access the method, right? So you can access the car object method using the bike object. Now you know that what is prototype inheritance. Let me tell you what is prototype chain. Now suppose if we have one more object here, so we will just get rid of these statements. Now in the bike object, if we just specify proto property of the bike object, and if I just say here proto car, and after that I will create a bicycle object here and just say let bicycle, and in the curly braces I will specify one property, so I will just say gear 5 Now here we'll just specify bicycle prototype property. So I will just say proto bike. Right? Now here is your question. Can you access the car method using the bicycle object? Yes, you can. Using the prototype chain, you can access any properties and methods of the object. So I will just say bicycle.show, and after that I will just print this bicycle on the console to display the prototype chain. So when you execute this, you will get message on the console. This is all happen using the prototype chain. Let me show you. Here you can see the gear object has a prototype property, and the prototype property has its own prototype property. You can create number of object properties chain as per your wish. Now using the bicycle object, you can access any properties and methods of car and bike, right? In this tutorial, we will learn JavaScript polymorphism. We will understand what is polymorphism is and how to use it. So let's get started. Polymorphism is a core concept of an object-oriented paradigm that provides a way to perform a single action in different forms. This provides an ability to call same method on different JavaScript objects. Using polymorphism in object-oriented programming, you can create variable, methods, and object that has more than one form. The use of polymorphism in JavaScript is to override property or method. If you wanted to override any property or method in the parent class, then you can do that using polymorphism. For example, so here if I just create two classes here and extend the first class, so I will just create a parent class here. So I will just say class employee, and here I will specify my constructor. So I will say constructor and specify my parameter. So I will say name here and initialize my parameter with this dot name is equal to name. And just after that, I will create a method here. So I will just say employee name and then say here console.log and just print the property on the console. So I will just say employee name this dot name, right? Now just after that, using the child class, I will just extend this parent class, right? In the previous lecture, you learned what is inheritance is all about. Using the inheritance, we will override the parent class method. Just like this. If I just extend the parent class here, so I will just say class member extends employee, and here I will just say constructor and specify two arguments. So I will just say name and salary, and I will just call the parent class constructor. So I will just say super, and in the parenthesis I will specify my constructor parameter. So I will just say name here, right? And just after that, I will initialize both properties. So I will just say this dot name is equal to name and this dot salary is equal to salary. Now here we wanted to override the parent class employee name method here. So I will just specify the same name for the child class method also. So I will just say employee name parenthesis, and here in the curly braces I will say console.log. I will print message. So I will say employee name this dot name and salary this dot salary, right? And just after that, we will access this class object and methods using the class instance. So I will say constant mb is equal to new member, right? And in the parenthesis I will just specify two arguments because we had specified two arguments to the constructor, right? So when you create an instance, you need to specify parameter for the class. So I will just say Neil Patel So this is the name of the employee and salary is 35,000, right? And just after that, I will just using the instance, I will call my employee name method. So I will just say mb.employee name. So when you execute this statement, you will get your message on the console, employee name and his salary, right? You can see here we had specified two methods with same name. So the second child class method will override the parent class method. You can also notice we are accessing both class methods using a child class instance. Now suppose if you wanted to execute the parent class method, then just comment this child method or just change the name of this method. So I will just comment this method and execute this again. So you will get your employee name on the console. So this time JavaScript will execute the parent class method, right? And if you just change the name of the child class method, then also you will get the same output, right? You can override class properties also, just like this. So here I will just add one more property. So in the employee class, I will just add one more property. So I will say this dot age is equal to 24 and override this property in the child class. And I will just add this property in the child class with different value. So I will just say this dot age is equal to 30. So we will override the parent property in the child class, right? And at the last, I will just specify this property in the message. So when you execute this, child class property will override the parent class property. The important thing to notice is if you wanted to override any property, you need to specify same name for both properties and you need to inherit the parent class. Now, I just wanted to explain one more topic, which is string representation. Every object ultimately inherits from object. So the methods available for object are by default available for all objects. One of those methods is toString. ToString method provides the default string representation of the object. Having a toString method that says something descriptive about an object. For example, I will just create a data object here. So I will just say constant dt is equal to new date, right? And just print this date on the console. So I will just say console.log dt. And just after that, I will print this date on the console with toString method. So I will just say console.log dt.toString and specify parentheses because this is a method. So when you execute this, you will get your date on the console. But what is the difference between the both outcome? I will show you. Now let's print the same statement with the type of keyword. So I will just say console.log type of dt.toString and say console.log type of dt. So when you execute this, you will get string and object on the console. So using this statement, you will understand using the toString, we are converting our object into string. The basic use of toString method is to convert object into string type, right? In this tutorial, we will understand new topic in ECMAScript 6, which is maps. In the previous JavaScript lectures, we had learned the basic concept behind the maps. But now we will explore the map topic and understand maps in detail. So let's get started. In ECMAScript 6, a new data structure introduced, which is maps. Map is just like an object that they can map a key to a value. When you need to map a key to a value, you will turn into an object because object allows you to map string keys to object values of any type. So Then why JavaScript need to introduce a new data structure? If you wanted to map a key to a value, then the object has some drawback. The prototypal nature of object that there could be mappings that you didn't intend. As you know, in object, key must be symbol or string. This nature preventing you from mapping object to a value. And also, there are no easy way to know how many mappings are there in the object. And you also know, objects do not guarantee any order to their properties. So, the map object address this scarcity. The map of object hold key value pair and remember the origin insertion of the keys. You can use any value as a key or value in the map. You are free to specify any type of values like primitive or object when you want to specify keys or values to the map. To get size of the map, you can use size property. Now let's understand how to create maps. When you want to create a map, you need to understand two methods first, set and get. Set method is used to set the value for the key in the map object, and get method is used to return a value associated with the key, undefined if there is none. Now let's take an example and understand map object well. So I will just create a map object here. To create a map object, you need to call map constructor. So to call constructor, we will just say constant my maps is equal to new map and specify parentheses, right? And just after that, I will just create let key string is equal to and specify string type. So this is the type of string, comma key object is equal to object. So I will just specify curly braces here. So this is type of object and specify comma here and say key function is equal to function and specify curly braces here, right? So we have created three variables. First variable is string, second variable is object, and third variable is function, right? Now just after that, I will set key and value to the map object. So I will just say my maps dot, I will call the set method here. So I will say set and specify my key. So here I will just say key string. So I will just specify my first variable name, comma, and specify value for this key. So I will just say key string value. Just after that, I will just copy this statement and print here and just change the key. So I will just specify key object and the value is key object value. I will just paste this statement again and say here key function and value is key function value, right? So here we had set key and value to the map object. If you wanted to know the map object size, then you can say my maps dot size. So here you just need to specify your map instance and specify size property, right? Now I just wanted to print the map object values on the console. So I will just say console.log my maps dot get. So here I will call the get method to get the key values. So I will just say get key string. I will just copy the statement and print here and just change the key. So I will just say key object and just print it again, and here I will say key function. So when you execute this, you will get your key values on the console, right? So I just wanted to show you, you can use not a number as a key also, just like this. So if I just say my maps dot set, and if I create a key and value pair here, so I will just say not a number, so I will say NaN, comma, and I will specify a value, so I will say not a number. So this is a valid statement. I will show you how. So if you check the not a number type, then you will get a number on the console, right? Now I will just get the value of the key not a number. So I will say console.log my maps.get not a number, right? So when you execute this, you will get your not a number key value. Now let's understand how to iterate the map object. Using the for loop, you can iterate map object just like this. So I will just say for, and in the parenthesis I will say let, and here we wanted to iterate key and value. So I will just specify key comma value, and just after that say off and specify your map object. So I will say my maps, right? And in the block I will say console.log, and I'm gonna add message on the console. I will specify backtick and say map key, and specify key here in the curly braces, comma value, and specify value in the curly braces, right? So when you execute this, you will get your map keys and values on the console, right? There is another way to declare map object. The map object have a relation with array objects. So you can specify array in the map object also, just like this. So if I just create another map here, so I will just say constant new map is equal to new map and specify parenthesis. Now in this parenthesis I will specify an array here. So I will just specify a square bracket, and in this square bracket I will specify my array. On the first index I will specify an array, so I will say bracket here and say 1 comma string 1, and just after that specify my first index array. Then I will say 2 comma string 2, and then specify second index array 3 comma 3 string, right? Now I also wanted to show you, if you wanted to iterate this array, you have one more way to iterate this array, just like this. Just specify your map object instance. So I will just say new map dot for each. Using for each method, you can iterate all the properties in the map object, right? So I will just say for each, and in the bracket I will specify function and specify two parameters, values and key. So here I wanted to iterate values and keys on the console. So I will just specify values and key as a parameter, and in the body of this method I will say console.log specify map key, and in the curly braces I will say key, specify value, and in the curly braces I will say value, right? So when you execute this, you will get map properties. As simple as that. In this tutorial, we will understand what is a weak map. In the previous lectures, we had learned what is a map is all about. Now in this lecture, we will explore the weak map. So what is weak map? The weak map is identical to the map object, but there are three disparities between maps and weak maps. First, weak map key must be an object. Second, weak map cannot be iterated or cleared. Third, key in weak map can be garbage collected, right? Suppose you have an object that is a key in a map. JavaScript will keep that object in memory as long as the map is in existence. But not so with the weak map. The weak map is a target to the garbage collection. Because of this, weak map cannot be iterated or cleared. If you are not familiar with garbage collection, then let me introduce the concept behind garbage collection. Garbage collection in JavaScript performs automatically and it is invisible to us. The garbage collection takes care of memory management in JavaScript. Suppose you have an object and this object has two properties. The first property can be accessed with the reference and the second property doesn't have any reference to access it. In that situation, JavaScript will put some junk data in the unreachable property. This property value called garbage value, right? For example, suppose if we create an object here, so I will just say let user is equal to, and we'll specify one property here. So I will just say name daily, right? Just after that, I will print this property on the console. I will say console.log user.name, right? Now, what if we specify null to the user object? Just like this. So I will just say user is equal to null and just print the name property on the console. So I will just say console.log user.name. Now, JavaScript will put garbage value in the name property. This is all happened behind the scene, right? Now let's move on to the main topic and understand how to create a weak map object. The most important thing is weak map is used to store private key in the object instance. For example, if we just create a weak map here, so I will just say let weak map is equal to new weak map, right? So I will just call the constructor of weak map using the new keyword. And just after that, I will just create an empty object here. So I will say let obj is equal to curly braces. So this will create an empty object here. Just after that, using the set keyword, we will specify key and value to the weak map. So I will just say weak map dot set, and in the parenthesis, I will first specify my key. So I will just say obj here and then specify value. So I will just say private here. And just after that, we will specify one more key and value to the weak map. So I will just say weak map dot set obj1 and specify value private data, right? So if you wanted to access this value, you can say weak map dot get. Using the get method, you can access values using the key. So I will just say get and specify obj here. So when you execute this, you will get your value on the console, right? As simple as that. Using this example, you will think that why we need to use a weak map if we have a map object to do the same thing. Both are similar. As I said earlier, weak map store object as a key, and this key is private. You can't access this key without knowing it. So suppose if you don't know which key you specified in the key, then what will you do? For example, now if you wanted to access this key, we can use for of loop and get the key on the console, just like this. If I just create a for of loop here, so I will just say for, and in the parenthesis I will say let, and in the square bracket I will specify key, comma value of weak map, right? And I will just print this key and value on the console. So I will just say console.log key and console.log value, right? So when you execute this, we expect key and values on the console, but this is not going to happen. When you execute this, you will get a type error message which says weak map is not iterable, right? So this means you can't access key of the weak map, it is private. So keep that into your account, right? So in this tutorial, we will understand set object. In the previous lecture, we had learned what is a weak map. Now in this tutorial, we will understand the concept behind the set object. So let's get started. The set object is identical to map object, but the set object allows you to store unique values of any type. It means set object is a collection of data where duplicates are not allowed. To create a set object, you just need to call the set object constructor, just like this. So I will just call the set object constructor here. So I will say constant st is equal to new set and specify parenthesis, right? Now to add elements in the set object, we have add method. Using the add method, you can add element in the set object, just like this. So I'm gonna add st dot add and specify your element. So I will just specify one value in the set object. So I will say 1 here. To add another value, just call the add method again. So I will say st.add 2, right? So this will add 2 values in the set object. If you are trying to insert the same values again, then set object would not insert this value in the collection, because set object only store unique values. So if I just add the 2 value again, just like this, st.add 2, and the set object will not insert this value because we had already inserted 2 in the set collection, right? You are free to specify any type of data in the set object. Like this, if you wanted to insert object in the set, so you can say st.add, and in the curly braces you can say a:1, b:2. So using this you can add object in the set collection. There is another way to declare set object, just like this. You just need to specify array in the set object constructor. So if I just add an array here, so I will just say square bracket and specify values. So I will just specify some values. So I will say 1, 2, 3, 4, and here I will specify duplicate values. So I will specify 4 here again, right? So when you print this, you will get only 1, 2, 3 and 4. You will not get duplicate values in the set, because set is not print duplicate values, it only accepts unique values, right? Now, to know whether the element is present in the set or not, you can use has method. Using the has method, you will know which element is present in the set collection. Has method will return true if the element is present in the collection, or return false. Just like this, if I just say st.has and specify element, so I will just say 4 here, then the return value would be true, because we have 4 in the set collection. And if the element is not present in the set object, you will get false on the console. So if I just specify 5 here, then you will get false on the console, right? To delete the element from the set, we have a delete method also, like this, st.delete, and specify your element in the parenthesis. So I will specify 4 here. So when you print this set object on the console, you can see the 4th element is deleted, right? To iterate set object, you can use for of loop or for each loop also, like this. So I will first iterate this object using the for of loop. So I will say for, and in the parenthesis I will say let item of st. So st is my set object instance. And then in the curly braces I will say console.log and specify item variable here. So this will print set object collection on the console. There is one more method to iterate the set collection using for each loop. So I will just say st.forEach, and in the parenthesis I will call the arrow function. So I will just specify my argument. So I will say value here and specify arrow, and in the curly braces I will say console.log value, right? So this will also print set collection on the console, right? Now let's move on to the next topic, weak set. In the previous lecture we had learned what is weak map. If you had not watched that video, then you should watch that first and move on with this lecture. The weak set is identical to weak map. There is no difference between weak set and weak map except their declaration. Weak set follows the set object principle and weak map follows the map object principle. Weak set is collection of objects and the object is unique in the weak set collection. The weak set can only contain objects and the objects contain maybe garbage collected. values in weak set cannot be iterated. Weak set is rarely used object in the JavaScript. Now, let's consider the following example. So if I just declare a weak set here, so we just wanted to call the constructor of the weak set class. So I will just say constant ws is equal to new weak set and specify parentheses. Just after that, I will create two objects here. So I will just say let obj is equal to curly braces. So we are creating two empty objects, and just say comma foo is equal to curly braces, right? So this will create two empty objects. Just after that, I will add these objects in the weak set object. So I will just say ws dot add and specify my first object in the parentheses. So I will just say object here, and just after that I will add my second object in the parentheses, right? So using console.log, you can see we have two objects in the weak set, right? Now to delete these objects, you can use delete method like this. So I will just say ws dot delete, and in the parentheses I will specify foo, right? And when I print this, you will get only one object on the console because we had deleted one object from the weak set, right? To know whether the object is present in the collection or not, you can use has method also. So if you just say ws.has and specify your foo object here, then you will get false on the console because we had already deleted foo objects from the weak set, right? In this tutorial, we will learn exception handling. We will understand what is the use of exception handling and how to use it. So let's get started. Exception handling is used to write error-free program. Exception handling is a mechanism which comes about to deal with error in control fashion. When you want to save your program from unwanted error messages and convert that error messages into a native language, then the error handling will help you out. In JavaScript, we have try and catch block to handle JavaScript errors. The syntax of try and catch block is this. So here I will just start my try block. So I will say try, and in the curly braces, here is your statements, and just after that I will create catch block with parentheses, right? So this parenthesis will take argument, right? And then specify curly braces and the statements. In this syntax, we had created two blocks. First is try block and second is catch block. The first try block will always execute. You are free to specify only one statement or multiple statements in the try block, right? The catch block will only execute when any exception, or you can say errors, occurs. It means when you execute your program, the try block will first execute, and then if the try block throw any error, then the catch block will execute and perform statements in the catch block. For example, if I just say try, and in the try block I will just say console.log and specify a simple message. So I will say try block, and in the catch block I will specify my parameter. So I will say here e, right? So this is my parameter, and just wanted to print this parameter and our message on the console. So I will say console.log catch block error and specify your parameter here. So when you execute this statement will not execute catch block because the try block will not throw any error. If we create an error in the try block, then let's see what will happen. So if I just create a variable here which is not defined, then let's see what will happen. So if I just say here variable and specify semicolon, so this variable is not defined, and when I execute this, the catch block will execute and print user defined error message on the console. You can specify any message in the catch block to determine your error message. Now, the few things you need to note before you use try-catch exception handling. Your code must be a valid JavaScript code, because try and catch block work for runtime error. Suppose you had specified closing square bracket here. So if I just specify here a closing square bracket, then the catch block will not execute because this is not a runtime error. Now you know that this is not a valid JavaScript code. So you will get an error message before we compile it. Now, if you wanted to describe your error message more profoundly, then you can use error object also. For example, so if I just specify a parameter here, so I will just say ERR, you can specify any parameter name for the catch method, and here I just wanted to describe my error message using error object properties. So I will just say console.log err.message. I will just copy this statement and print here, and just remove the message property and call name property here, and I will just paste it again and call stack property here, right? You can specify other name also to the error object. So here we had specified three properties of error object: name property, which return a name of the error; message property, which returns only an error message; and stack property will return current call stack, right? Now suppose we wanted to execute a few statements after the catch block execute. In that situation, we have finally block also. The finally block will always execute. So let's see how it's work. So I will just create a finally block here just after the catch block. So I will say finally, and in the curly braces I will specify console.log finally execute. So when you execute this, you will see the finally block executed just after the error messages. So whenever you wanted to execute any statement after the error message, you can use finally block also. That's it. I hope you understand this lecture. In this tutorial, we will learn regular expression. We will understand how to use regular expression in JavaScript. So, what is regular expression? Regular expression is a powerful way to searching and replacing inside a string. It means if you wanted to replace or search any string or pattern, then you can use regular expression. Regular expression is mostly used to search a string, or if you wanted to replace anything in the string. In that situation, regular expression will definitely help you out. There are two ways to implement regular expression: using a long syntax and short syntax. We will first understand using the long syntax. So, to create regular expression, you need to call an instance of the regular expression object, like this. The regular expression consists of pattern and flag. So when you are specifying argument in the regular expression object, the first argument is a pattern and the second argument is flag. Let's consider the following example. So I will just say let reg, so this is the instance, is equal to new, and I will just call regular expression class. So I will just say reg exp. So here you don't need to specify the whole name of regular expression, so just say reg exp, and in the parenthesis say pattern. So this is my first parameter, comma flag, and this is my second parameter. We will understand this pattern and flag soon, right? The second way to create regular expression is using slashes, like this. So I will just say here reg expression is equal to, and specify / pattern, and then again specify / here. Now if you wanted to add a flag, you can do that also. Just do the same thing, and just after the / here specify your flag, right? Now let's understand how to use it. Suppose if you wanted to search daily word in the string, then you can write this type of code. So I will just write a string here. So I will say let str, and in the double quote I will say welcome to daily tuition. Now I just wanted to search a daily word in this string. So in the regular expression we are specifying string pattern, right? So I will just say let reg is equal to new regular expression, and in the square bracket here I wanted to search my daily word, so I will say daily here. Now using the search method we will search the daily word in the string, and the search method will return a word index number starting position. The string start with 0 index like an array element. So I will just say here console.log, and in the parenthesis I will say str. So I will call my string dot search. So I will just call my search method to search the string and specify a regular expression instance here, right? So when you execute this, you will get index number starting position of your word. You can do the same thing with short syntax also. So I will just get rid of this instance of regular expression, and here I'm gonna add let reg is equal to, and here I will just specify / daily and specify / again. How the JavaScript know this is a regular expression? To know this is a regular expression, we are using /s. So the JavaScript will take this statement as a regular expression, just like a string which we specify in the double quote, right? So this will return the same outcome. I personally suggest using the short syntax when you are using a regular expression. But if you wanted to use a variable as a pattern, then you need to use long syntax for that. Now you know that we are using pattern to search for a specific word in the string. But what is flag? And let's understand how to use it. Regular expression have 5 type of flags. Flags allow for global and case sensitive searching. These flags are used separately or in any order. For example, so this is your string. So if you specify the regular expression word in the capital letters, and let's see what will happen. So if I just specify here a capital word daily and execute this, then you will get -1 on the console. So the -1 refers to not found. It means regular expression can't find this word in the string. To solve this case sensitive word, we have flags like this. If you just specify flag just after the pattern like this, and if I just say I here, and when I execute this again, this will return the word index number. So the flag used to search case sensitive words. There are 5 types of flags in the regular expression. So the I flag used for case sensitive words, G flag used to global search, M flag used for multi-line search, U flag used for unique code, treat pattern as a unique code sequence, and the last P flag used for sticky search that matches starting at the current position in the target string. There are plenty things to do with the regular expression. To cover everything in detail, we need to start a new tutorial series on regular expression. If you are interested to learn regular expression, then you can comment me. If I get a lot of requests from you, then I will definitely start this tutorial series soon. That's it. I hope you understand this basic concept behind regular expression. That is all for this tutorial. We will see you in the next one. In this tutorial, we will understand what is a DOM. We now move to the JavaScript as used within a web browser, commonly called client-side scripting. Whatever we had learned so far is legal JavaScript code. From now, the future few tutorials will depend on the DOM scripting. Hoping that you know the basic of HTML and CSS, so we will move forward with the DOM scripting. Using HTML and CSS, you can create a static, informative web pages, and these pages can be called document. Using JavaScript, you can fairly make these pages dynamic. Using the web browser rather than working on the text, you can use graphical interface. These pages might dynamically load information as needed. So we will first understand what is DOM. DOM stands for Document Object Model. According to the Document Object Model, all tags in HTML is an object. The text specified in the tag is also an object. So all these objects are accessible using JavaScript. Conceptually, DOM is a tree. A tree consists of nodes. Every node has parents or 0 or more child nodes. The root node is document, has only one child, HTML. The HTML element has two children, title and head. The following is the DOM tree. You can also call HTML as a root element. In this DOM tree, we had two child nodes, head and body. Using root element, you can access all the child nodes. In the head node, we have title, and in the body, we have HTML elements. It depends on you what you put inside the body and in the head. If you put anything in the body, then the browser will create a child node of body element and you can access this node using the DOM tree. To understand DOM tree in detail, we need to learn from the example. So we will just create a simple example here. So I will just create a simple HTML snippet. So I will just specify an exclamation mark here and just enter. So this is our simple HTML document. I will just remove unwanted tag from the HTML document. We have doc type, HTML, head, title, body, and in the body we have paragraph with demo text. Right? So this is your simple HTML snippet. So in this example, we have a root element HTML and the root element consists of two child nodes, head and the body. In the head, we had title with the title text and in the body, we had paragraph with demo text. You can access all the text and all the HTML tags using the DOM tree. To understand how DOM tree look like, just run your document and right click on the document and say inspect. So here on the elements tab, you can see your DOM tree. So in this DOM tree, we have a root element HTML. By clicking on the tags, you can explore your DOM tree like this. You can extend your DOM tree by adding multiple tags in the body or in the head of the HTML document. In the next tutorial, we will understand how to access this DOM tree in the JavaScript. In the next tutorial, we will understand what is the use of DOM object and what can you do with this object. That's it. That is all for this tutorial. I hope you understand this lecture. In this tutorial, we will understand how to access document object model using JavaScript. And we will also understand how to manipulate DOM elements. In the previous video, we had learned what is DOM is all about. Now, let's understand how to access document object model elements. So, let's get started. So, when we started learning JavaScript, we had learned how to import JavaScript in the HTML file using script tag. You can use JavaScript in the HTML using script tag, or you can import JavaScript file using the source attribute of script tag. So when you import JavaScript in the HTML, you can immediately begin using API for the document or window. As I said in the previous lecture, using JavaScript, you can create dynamic pages. Then what you can do with the DOM object? Using DOM object, you can change any HTML elements and its attributes. Using DOM object, you can create new HTML elements with its attribute, and also you can remove it if you want. Using DOM object, you can add and change CSS styling of the page. DOM object can react all the event in the HTML page, and you can create or change any event in the web page. So, DOM is a standard object model and programming interface for HTML. The DOM object defines the HTML element as object, and the DOM object also defines properties of HTML elements and methods to access HTML elements, and also event for HTML elements. So basically you can do everything with HTML elements using document object model. In the document object model, methods are action performed on HTML elements, and properties are values which you can change or set. So we will first understand the DOM programming interface. As I said in the previous lecture, all HTML elements are defined as objects. In the programming interface, property is a value which you can get or set, and methods are action performed on the HTML elements, like deleting an HTML element or create a new one. Now let's take a look at the example and understand how to access HTML element using document object model. So the commonly used to access HTML elements is using method called getElementById. Using this method, you can access any HTML element in the DOM tree. You can also change any HTML text or specify a new text using JavaScript. Using DOM inner HTML property, you can set or get any value of the HTML element. So let's consider the following example. In the previous video, we had created this dom.html file. So in this file, in the body section, I will just create an empty paragraph here and specify id para, and just leave this paragraph as it is. Now using this id, we will access this paragraph using the JavaScript. But first, we need to link my main.js file using script tag. To use JavaScript in the HTML, you need to first link your JavaScript file to the HTML document. You can use JavaScript in the HTML also, but we are using external JavaScript file to maintain my JavaScript code separately. So I will just link this file. I will just say script and specify attribute source, and in this attribute I will just specify my main.js file, right? After that, in the main.js file, we will write some code to access the paragraph and specify some demo text. So I will just click on the main.js file, and here, so in this file I will just select para is equal to, so this is my variable, and now I will just first call my document. So to call the document, we have a document object. So we'll just say document. So this document object refers to the current document. And then I will call the method of this document object. So I will say dot get element by id. As the name implies, using this method you can get your element by its id. So I will say get element by id, and in the parenthesis I will specify para. So this is my id, right? Now we have paragraph in the para variable. Let me show you the paragraph on the console. So I will just say console.log and specify para here, right? So this is your paragraph. So this method will return paragraph to the para variable. Now you have your paragraph. Now we wanted to specify text to this paragraph. To get content of an element, you can use inner HTML property. As I said earlier, using inner HTML property, you can get or set text to the HTML element. So I will just say para dot inner HTML is equal to, so I will just set text to this paragraph, and in the double quote I will say this is DOM tutorial, right? So when you execute this, you will get your text on the document. This text will not print on the console. We are not printing this text on the console. This text will print on the document because we are using HTML, right? HTML all tags are print on the document. Just after that, you can do the same thing with JavaScript chaining also. So I will just say document dot get element by id and specify my para here, which is the id of my paragraph, dot inner HTML, and specify my text here. So I will just say this is DOM tutorial. We will understand what is JavaScript chaining in the future tutorials. But just for now, we are just creating a chain of methods and properties. So when you execute this, you will get the same outcome. You can do the same thing with getElementByTagName method also. The getElement by tag name method will get the element by the HTML tag name, just like this. So I will just let p is equal to document.getElement by tag name, and in the parenthesis I will specify p, right? When you print this on the console, you will get your paragraph object on the console, right? So when you execute this, you will get HTML collection object, and this object contains paragraph. You can access any HTML element using JavaScript. That's it. I hope you understand this lecture. In this tutorial, we will understand document object model CSS selector. In the previous video, we had learned how to manipulate HTML element using document object model methods. But there are much more general methods that you can locate element not just by ID or tag name, but also by the relationship to the other element. Now, in this tutorial, we will take a look at two methods of document object. First, query selector, and then query selector all. We will understand each method one by one. So let's get started. We will first take a look at query selector method. So in the HTML document, we will create a simple div element with the class div1, right? In this division tag, we will create two paragraphs. So we will first create a paragraph 1. So I will just say paragraph. So I will just specify p here and tab, and just specify class para. And just after that, I will create another paragraph with ID, right? So I will just say p tab ID is equal to para1, right? So we wanted to specify unique ID to the paragraph, so we will specify para1 here. Now using query selector, we will select the paragraph and specify some demo text using inner HTML property. Query selector method returns the first element that matches the specified CSS selector in the document. It means the query selector only returns the first paragraph and specify text using inner HTML property. Now, I will just open my main.js file. I will select a paragraph using query selector method. So I will just say let para is equal to document.querySelector. So I will just call my query selector method, and in the parenthesis I will call the paragraph using a CSS selector. So we will select the paragraph using the class. To select your paragraph using the class, you need to specify class name with dot operator, right? So I will just say dot here and specify your class name, right? So the query selector used to select CSS selectors. So we'll just say dot para here, right? Let me show you the paragraph on the console. So I will just specify console.log and say para here. So this method will only return one paragraph. Suppose in the dom.html file, we will create one more paragraph with the class para, then this method will not select the second paragraph because this method only returns the first matching element in the document. Now, just after that, I will just specify inner HTML property and specify some demo text to the first paragraph. So I will just say para.innerHTML is equal to paragraph, right? Now, using query selector, you can also select your HTML element using tag name. So if I specify only p here in the query selector, then this is also a valid statement. So if I just specify p here, then the result would be same, right? You are not limited to specify tag name or class name in the query selector, but you can also specify a unique ID to access HTML element, just like this. So if I just specify here hash para1, then this would return the same outcome. So now here we are accessing the paragraph using its ID. So whenever you wanted to access paragraph using ID, you need to specify hash before the name of the ID, right? So basically, using query selector, you can access any HTML element by class name, tag name, or using ID. Query selector is a CSS selector which allows you to select HTML element like CSS selectors. Like you can select HTML in the cascading style sheet to specify styling to your HTML elements, right? If you're not familiar with CSS, then make sure you first understand CSS selector and then move forward with this tutorial. Now let's understand what is query selector all. So query selector all method is identical to query selector method, but instead of returning only one element, this method will return all the matches element in the document that matches all the specified CSS selector. For example, so in the main.js file, I will just get rid of these statements, and here I will just create let para is equal to, and here I will say document.query selector all. Don't forget to select the right method. So now we are selecting query selector all. Now in the parentheses of this method, we will select the paragraph using class name. So I will just specify dot here before the class name and specify my class name here. So I will just specify para here, right? And I just wanted to show you what this method return. So I will just say console.log and specify para here. So this method will return a node list object. This node list object contains two paragraphs. Now to access any paragraph in the node list, we have square bracket. In this node list, we have collection of nodes. To access these nodes, we have index number. Using index number, you can access any node in the node list object, like this. So if you wanted to access the first paragraph, then I will just say para, and in the square bracket, I will specify 0 to select my first paragraph, and then specify dot, call my inner HTML property and specify some demo text, right? You can do the same thing to select the second paragraph also, but just change the index number. Now you know the difference between query selector and query selector all method. In the next tutorial, we will access HTML element and specify some styling. In this tutorial, we will understand how to specify styling to the HTML element using JavaScript. So JavaScript has a special property to specify styling to the HTML element, just like CSS. Style property allows you to specify different styling to the HTML element. In the previous lecture, we had learned how to access element using query selector and query selector all method. Now in this tutorial, we will take a look at style property of the document object. So let's get started. As you know, style property allows you to style your element. Therefore, we will directly jump to the example to understand how this property works. So in dom.html file, I will just create a simple submit button here. So I will just say input, type submit and specify class submit. Then in main.js file, I will just select this submit button using query selector. So I will just say let sub is equal to document.query selector, and in the parenthesis I will specify double quote and say dot submit. So I will just select the submit button using class name. Now let's see how to style your submit button using JavaScript. Now when you specify a new property to the element, then you need to be careful about one thing. Whenever you specify property, you need to specify exact property name, because style properties are case sensitive. For example, so if I just say here sub dot style dot background color, and we'll specify background color, so I will just say equal to, and in the double quote I will say black. So when you execute this property will apply to the element, right? So whenever you specify any styling property, you need to keep in mind that every property starts with the small letter, and when you combine two words like background and color, then the second word should be start with the capital letter, right? So if you specify a small letter here, then this will not specify background color to the submit button, right? So the JavaScript will not recognize this property, and therefore you will get your default background color to the element. Now let's take a look at few styling properties of JavaScript. So we will just change the color of the button. So I will say sub dot style dot color is equal to white. Then I will just change font size. So I will say sub dot style dot font size is equal to, and in the double quote I will say 3em. And the last, I wanted to specify padding also. So I will say sub dot style dot padding is equal to 1.5 em. In JavaScript, we have more than 50 properties to change element styling. But now we have another method to styling your HTML element using CSS. So to do that, we need to create a class in CSS. So I will first remove the class name from the submit button, right? And in the head, I will create a CSS class. So I will just create a style tag here, and in the style tag, I will declare a class submit. So I will just say dot submit, and in the curly braces, I will specify few CSS properties. So I will just say padding 1em and 4em. Then I will specify font size 1em, background color black, and the color property white smoke, right? Now in main.js file, I will just get rid of these statements, and here I will just say let sub is equal to document.querySelector. I will just call querySelector method, and in this querySelector I will select submit button using input type. So as you know, querySelector is a CSS selector to select your element. So I will just say input, and in the square bracket I will say type is equal to submit. So here we are using input to select submit button, right? After that, we wanted to add CSS class using JavaScript. So to add this class, we have class list property. Using class list property, we will access add method. So the add method will apply CSS style to the element like this. So I will just call sub dot class list property dot add method, and in the parenthesis I will specify my CSS class name. So I will just say submit here. So when you execute this, your submit button would be changed. Using this method, you can add any CSS class to the element. This method is really helpful when you are working with event to add class to the specific element on event fire. In this tutorial, we will learn how to create a new HTML element using JavaScript. In the previous video, we had learned how to access nodes using querySelector and how to style them. Well, in this tutorial, we will understand how to create new nodes using JavaScript. So let's get started. Till now, we had learned how to access nodes using document object, the advantage of using DOM in the JavaScript. Using JavaScript, you can create your own nodes explicitly. To create your new DOM element, you have create element method. Using this method, you can create your new node explicitly. This method only create a new node, but it doesn't add it to the DOM. You will have to do that in the separate step. Now let's understand how to create a new node with JavaScript. For example, so here we will create two paragraphs with some demo text and then append this paragraph in the division tag. So in the dom.html file, we will first create a division tag with the class. So I will just say div class content, right? And just after that, in the main.js file, we will create two paragraphs. So we'll just say let p1 is equal to document dot create element. right? So I will just call my create element method, and in the parentheses of this method I will specify my tag name which I wanted to create. So here I wanted to create paragraph, so I will just say P here, right? To create second paragraph I will just say let P2 is equal to document dot create element P, right? Just after that I wanted to specify some demo text to this paragraph, so I will just use text content property of the document object. So I will just say P1 dot text content is equal to, so I will just call text content property of the document object and specify some demo text to the first paragraph. Just after that I will select my second paragraph, so I will say P2 dot text content is equal to and specify some demo text here also, so I will just say second paragraph here. So when you execute this will not do anything because we haven't added this paragraph to the DOM. So to do that we have append child method to insert element in the DOM. Append child method used to insert a node to the end of the list of the children of a specified parent nodes. So whatever you wanted to insert in the DOM, you have to specify parent node first, and using the parent node you can append your child nodes. Now to append this paragraph in the division tag, you need to first select the division tag. So I will just say constant content is equal to, and here I will first select the division using the class name. So I will say document dot query selector, and using the query selector I will select the division tag. So I will just say dot content, right? So this statement will select the division tag. Just after that I will just append the paragraph in the division tag. So I will just say content dot append child method. So I will just call append child method to add paragraph in the DOM element. So I will just say append child, and in the parentheses I will specify my paragraph, right? So I will just say P1 here. Just after that I will append my second paragraph also. So I will say content dot append child P2, right? So using this method you can append your child in the division tag. So when you execute this you will get your paragraph in the division tag, right? Now suppose if you wanted to append this paragraph in the body, then you can do that as well. So I will just comment this second paragraph, and here I will say document dot body dot append child and specify my second paragraph here. So this will append the second paragraph in the body section, right? You are not limited to create only paragraph in the DOM. You can create any HTML element using create element method. So it means DOM gives us full control of HTML elements. So what if you wanted to specify attribute to your HTML element? In that situation you have set attribute method. Using this method you can set value to the specified element. If the attribute value exists, then only value is updated. Otherwise, new attribute is added with the specified name and value. For example, if I just wanted to specify class attribute to the paragraph, then I will say P1 dot set attribute, and in the parenthesis I will first specify name of the attribute. So I will say class here, and the value goes to the second parameter. So I will say para1 here, right? So when you execute this, you will see your class and your class name to the first paragraph, right? Now if you just change the value, then only the value is updated and the name of the attribute remains the same, right? If you can add the attribute to the element, then you can remove attribute as well. To remove attribute, we have remove attribute method. You can remove attribute value using attribute name like this. So if you wanted to remove your class attribute from the first paragraph, you will say P1 dot remove attribute, and in the parenthesis just specify your attribute name here. So I wanted to remove my class attribute, so I will say class here, right? So when you execute this, your attribute would remove. Basically, there are lots of methods in the JavaScript that you can use in proper circumstances, right? In this tutorial, we will learn what is data attribute. If you have a basic understanding of HTML, then this would not be different for you. In HTML, you can specify data attribute using data name along with the name of your data. So, it means any attribute on any element whose attribute name starts with the data is a data attribute. Suppose you have an element and you wanted to store some data for extra information that doesn't have any visual representation. In that situation, you can use data attribute. Like this, in HTML, you can specify data attribute to the element. So I will just create navigation tag here and say class navbar and specify two data attributes. So I will say data number 0 and create my second attribute. So I will say data name navbar light, right? So we had created two data attribute here. Now if you wanted to use any extra information in your JavaScript program, then this data attribute will definitely help you. Now suppose if you have two navigation menu with same class and if you wanted to access the first navigation menu with their name, then the data attribute will help you. Like this. So I will just create two navigation menu here. I already created my first navigation menu. So I will just copy the first navigation menu and paste it here and just change my data attribute to 1 and the data name navbar dark. In main.js file, I will just first select my navigation tag using navbar class. So I will say let now is equal to document dot query selector all. I will just call query selector all method and in the parentheses I will say dot navbar, right? Using the class name, we will access navigation tag using the class name. In the previous video, we had learned how to set attribute to the element using set attribute method. Now using get attribute method, you can get the attribute value. You can also get the data attribute using get attribute method. You can get any attribute value using this method, just like this. So I will just say console.log and in the parentheses, I will say now. I will select my first navigation menu using the index number. So I will say 0 here. And say get attribute and in the parentheses I will specify name of my attribute. So I will say data number here. To access my second navigation menu attribute, I will just copy the statement, paste it here and just change the navigation menu index number to 1, right? But when you access your attribute using get attribute method, you need to write this code too long. To solve this problem, you have a dataset property. Using dataset property, you can get attribute value using attribute name. To read the data attribute, we have dataset property. To get the attribute value, specify dataset property dot the name of your data attribute which you had specified just after the data name, like this. I will just say console.log and in the parentheses, I will first select my first navigation menu. So I will say nav and in the square bracket I will specify 0 to select my first navigation menu and say dot data set and specify your data attribute here. So I will just say number here. So here you just need to specify your data name. You don't need to specify the complete name of your data attribute here. So I will just say number here, right? So using this method you can access your both navigation menu number, right? You can do the same thing with the second attribute also. So I will just copy the statement and paste it here and just change the number to name, right? So using this statement, you can access both navigation menu attribute. Now, you know that how to use a data property to access data attribute. Now, I just wanted to introduce a new useful property in JavaScript, which is class name. Using class name property, you can get or set value of the class attribute of the specified element. You can specify your class name using string. To specify multiple classes, separate your class name with spaces. For example, now in this example, we will create toggle class function this function toggle two classes with the flag variable like this. So I will just first create a paragraph in the dom.html file. So I will just say p class is equal to toggle, right, and specify some demo text. So I will just say color this text, right, and create two CSS classes to change text color. I will just go to the head section of this document and say style and just create a style tag and just say dot toggle in. So this is my first class, and specify color property light coral, and then I will just create my second class dot toggle out and specify property color light blue, right. Now just go to the main.js file. In this file we will first get rid of these all statements, and I will just say let toggle is equal to document.querySelector and select your paragraph with the class name. I will just say toggle here, right. Now just after that I will just create an anonymous function here. So I will just say let color is equal to function, and I will just specify an argument flag here, and in the body of this function I will create if and else statement. So I will just say if, I will just specify my flag variable name here, so I will just say flag, and in the if statement I will just say toggle dot class name is equal to toggle in. So when the if condition become true, I just wanted to specify toggle in class to the paragraph, and when the condition become false, in the else statement I will say toggle dot class name is equal to toggle out, right. So when if condition become true, I will specify toggle in class to the paragraph, and if the condition become false, I will specify toggle out class to the paragraph. And just after that I will just call my function with the parameter. So I will first specify true here and run this document. So when you change the value of the flag argument, you can see your text color will automatically change, right, because every time when you change the value of the argument, the if condition will become true and false and specify different classes to the paragraph, right. In this tutorial we will learn what is event. We will briefly understand how to create event and how to use it in JavaScript. But let me first tell you what is event is all about. So let me first describe event in very simple words. Event is just an action performed by the user. There are almost 200 type of event are there in the JavaScript. We will not take all of them, but we will just learn a few important events. Using event, you can perform different type of operation on HTML element. One of the most important event is click event. Click event mostly used to click a button or to perform any form submission or any validation. You can also create different type of animation using event. Now we will first take a look at click event. The click event simulate a mouse click on an element. The click event is fired when your mouse pointer is pressed and released on a single element. For example, to call click event in the HTML, you have onClick attribute like this. So in dom.html file, I will first create a paragraph with a class para, and just before the paragraph I will create a button here. So I will just create a paragraph here. So I will say p class para, right, and just before this paragraph I will add button here. So I will say button and specify onClick attribute here to call click event. So I will say onClick is equal to, so in the double quote you can specify JavaScript statement. So here I will say document.querySelector. So I will select the paragraph using querySelector method, and in the square bracket I will specify dot para, right. So I will first select the paragraph and change paragraph text. So I will say dot inner HTML and specify date object here. So when you execute this statement, your paragraph will display current date. right? Now, when you execute this and click on the button, you will see your current date, right? So in this example, we just specified inner property to the paragraph using onClick event. To call click event, we had used onClick attribute, right? Now you know that you can execute JavaScript statement using onClick event. So now you can call any function using onClick attribute, right? Like this. So in main.js file, I will create a function and specify some text to the paragraph. So in main.js file, I will just say function, specify function name, display, and in this function, I will specify inner property to the paragraph and specify some demo text. So I will say document.querySelector, specify my paragraph class name here, dot inner HTML property. And just after that, specify some demo text. So I will say this is paragraph text, right? And then in dom.html file, I will just get rid of this JavaScript statement, and here I will specify my function name. So I will specify display here with parentheses. So when you execute this and perform the click event, you will get paragraph text on the document. So till now, we have seen click event using HTML markup. Now we will understand how to create a click event using JavaScript without any HTML attribute. To add event using JavaScript, you need to call addEventListener method. Using this method, you can call any JavaScript event. Now let's consider the following example. So I will just remove this onClick attribute from the button and specify class btn, right? Just after that, in main.js file, I will write some JavaScript code. So I will first select the button element and add addEventListener method to this button, right? So I will say document.querySelector, specify button class here. So I will say .btn, and just after that, I will just call addEventListener method. So I will say addEventListener here. In this parenthesis, I will just specify event name. So I will say click here, comma, I will specify second argument function, right? So I will say function here. The first argument refers to the event name and the second argument refers to the action, right? So in this function, I will say document.querySelector and select the paragraph. So I will say .para here and specify inner HTML property and specify some demo text here. So I will say using addEventListener method, right? So when you execute this, you will get paragraph text on the document, right? Using addEventListener method, you can specify any event to the HTML element. You can also specify styling to your HTML element just like this. So in dom.html file, I will specify some demo text to the paragraph. So I will just say increase font size and color. And in main.js file, I will just comment this statement and say document.querySelector, select my paragraph, call the style property dot font size and specify font size 3 em. And just after that, I will just copy the statement, paste it here, and just remove the font size property and specify color here, right? And the color is equal to tomato, right? So when you execute this, the text of the paragraph will increase and the color will change to tomato. Using event, you can create thousands of animations. In this tutorial, we will learn focus and blur event. In the previous video, we had learned what is click event is all about. Now in this lesson, we will concentrate on focus and blur event. So let's get started. The focus event is fired when HTML element has received focus, and the blur event is fired when the element lost focus. Along with that, we will also understand how to use target property of event object. So using the following example, you will completely understand how to use focus and blur event. So in dom.html file, we will create a form with two text boxes. we are using division tag to create a form ID, and using focus and blur event we are going to change background color of the text boxes, right? So I will just create a division tag here. So I will say div and specify ID form, right? And in this division tag I will create two text boxes. So I will say first input type text and specify placeholder name, right? Just after that I will create another text box here. So I will say input type password and specify placeholder password, right? Now I just wanted to style these two text boxes using style element. So I'm going to use CSS to style this element. So I will say style here in the head section of this dom.html file. I will create style tag here and select the input text boxes using input selector and specify padding 0.5 em, text align, center, and font size is going to be 0.9 em, right? Now our design is ready. So I will just go to the main.js file and I will select the division tag using its ID. So I will say let form is equal to document.getElement by ID, and in the parentheses I will specify form, right? So this is my ID name. Just after that I will select the form ID and add event listener to it. Using event listener we will call focus event first. So I will say form dot add event listener, and in the parentheses I will first specify my event. So I will say focus here, and the second parameter is the handler function. So I will say function, and in the parentheses of this function I will specify one argument. So I will say event here. Now here we are going to use target property of event object to get current element, right? Like this. So to get your current element I will just use event.target property. I just want to show you how this target property works. So I will say console.log event, I will specify parameter name here and dot target. So this is my target property, and just after that I will specify comma here and specify true, right? So this boolean indicate that the listener should be invoked at most once after being added. If true, the listener would be automatically removed when invoked. So when you execute this and focus on any HTML element like text box 1 or text box 2, then the target property will return the text box. So on the console you will get your element, right? So when you click on the first text box you will get first text box on the console, and if you click on the second one then you will get second text box on the console, right? So now using target property you can get your current element, right? Now you know that the target property will return element. Now we are going to use this target property to change the background color of the text box. So I will just remove this statement, and here I will say event.target.style background is equal to, and specify background color here. So I will say light blue, right? So when you execute this, you can change your text box background color when you focus on it. But you will notice when you click on the text box color remains the same. In this situation, you need to create another event listener to remove this background color and specify default style to this element. So in this situation, you can use blur event. As I said previously, blur event is fired when the element lost focus. So when the element lost focus, we will specify default background color to that element. So here I will just select the form and add event listener to it, and then specify blur event and the handler function and just change the background color. So I will say form dot add event listener and specify event here. So I will say blur, comma, the second argument which is the handler function. So I will say function, and in the parentheses I will specify an argument event, and in this function I will say event.target.style dot background, and then I do not specify anything to the background property, right? So when you execute this, your text box background color will change automatically when you lost focus from the element. So when you click on it, you will get your light blue color, and when you lost your focus, you will get default background color of the text box element, right? These two events are very important when you wanted to validate your input text boxes using JavaScript. In this tutorial, we will take a quick look at jQuery. So we are not going to cover everything of jQuery, but we'll just take a basic look at jQuery library and understand how to use it. So let's get started. jQuery is a very powerful and popular JavaScript language library. jQuery is used to manipulate DOM element and executing AJAX request. jQuery is really very simple and simplify your JavaScript code. So let's understand main three differences to use jQuery library. jQuery is very lightweight when comparing to JavaScript framework. jQuery has various plugins which can be used for different needs. The third main important of using jQuery is it is a designer friendly library. Using jQuery, you can create thousands of animation with minimal code. Using minimal code, you can achieve the same result using jQuery. To use jQuery, you need to include jQuery library to your document. The easiest way to include jQuery is using CDN. jQuery is free to download, so you can download it and link to your document as well. So just go to your browser and type jQuery CDN. Just click on this website and down here, right click here and select copy link address. I am using minified version of jQuery. Using the script tag, I will just include jQuery library to my document. So I will just go to my dom.html file, and just before the custom JavaScript file, I will just create script tag here, and in the source attribute, I will just press Ctrl V. This will paste the address of the jQuery library. Now you are free to use any jQuery code in your document. In jQuery, if you wanted to create any variable, you need to specify $sign to make a valid identifier. A $sign is an alias of jQuery function, and this function simply refers to a jQuery object. The jQuery object holds set of DOM elements. We are not going too deep in jQuery right now, but we will just understand the basic concept. jQuery function primarily call using two ways, with CSS selector or with HTML. Calling jQuery function using CSS selector will return jQuery object matching that selector, just like we are using query selector all method in JavaScript. Now let's understand how to select a paragraph using jQuery. So I will just create two paragraphs in the dom.html file. So I will just say p class para1 and specify some demo text. So I will say paragraph 1 and just create another paragraph. So I will say p class para2 and specify text paragraph 2, right? And just after that, in main.js file, I will just write one line of code to select the paragraph like this. Here you don't need to specify any query selector method to select paragraph. Just use $sign to call jQuery function and specify your CSS selector. So I will just say let p is equal to, and to select the first paragraph I will say $, and in the parenthesis I will specify double quote and say dot para1, right? So this will select my first paragraph. So I will say console.log and print paragraph on the console. So this statement will return the object on the console. So right now we have this paragraph in this object. To access the paragraph, I will just say console.log and specify p variable with index number. So I will say 0 here, right? So when you execute this, you will get your paragraph on the console, right? So if I just change the second paragraph class name and just say para1 here, then jQuery will select both paragraph and you can access this paragraph using jQuery object, right? So you can see both paragraph here and you can access both paragraph using index number, right? Now let's understand how to call jQuery function with HTML. Calling jQuery with HTML, on the other hand, will create a new DOM element. To create a new DOM element using jQuery is very simple. Using only one line of code, you can create new DOM element like this. So in main.js file, I will just say let para3 is equal to, and just call the jQuery function using $sign, and in the parenthesis I will just put double quote here and say p class para3 and specify text to the paragraph. So I will say paragraph 3 here and just close the paragraph tag, right? So using console.log, you can access this paragraph with index number. So this statement will create a new paragraph for you. So this will create a new jQuery object, and using this object, you can access your paragraph with index number, right? jQuery makes your JavaScript very easy and simple. If you wanted to learn more about jQuery, then must tell me to start a jQuery tutorial series in the comment. So in this lecture, we are going to understand what is ECMAScript 6 modules. The first question comes in your mind is, what is module? A JavaScript module is a piece of reusable code that can easily be incorporated into other JavaScript files. Until recently, the only way to work with modular JavaScript was to incorporate a library that could be handle importing and exporting modules. Now with ES6, JavaScript itself supports modules. JavaScript modules are stored in separate files, one file per module. There are two options when creating and exporting a module. You can export multiple JavaScript objects from a single module or one JavaScript object per module. Everything inside an ECMAScript 6 module is private by default and runs in the strict mode. Public variables, functions, and classes are exposed using export keyword. Now, let's take an example and understand how to create modules using ECMAScript 6. So we have two files here. First is magic.js and second is main.js. In magic.js file, I will just create two functions. The first function is using function keyword and the second is using the arrow function. We will specify export keyword to both functions to export this function from the module. We will export this both function using export keyword, right? So I will just create my first function here. So I will just say export function and specify name sum and specify two arguments a, b. And just after that, here I will call multiplication function. So I will just say here multi, and in the parenthesis I will say a, b. I will just specify the arguments here. Just after that, I will say console.log and print the addition of a and b here. So I will just say a plus b, right? So this is my first function. Now I just wanted to create my second function using arrow function, right? So I will just say here export let multi is equal to, and in the parenthesis I will specify two arguments, just specify arrow here, and in the body of this function I will say console.log and specify multiplication with two arguments. So I will just say a multiply by b, right? Now you can export this function using a single statement as well. So I will just remove this export keyword and just say here export, and in the curly braces you can export this function on single line as well. So I will just say sum comma multi. So this statement will export both functions at the same time, right? Now this is our module. In this module we had exported two functions. Now here we are going to use this code in other JavaScript file. As you know, module provide us reusability of the code. So I will just use this function in the other JavaScript file. So let's see how you can access these functions in the other JavaScript file. So we have an import keyword to import this function in the other JavaScript file. But before you import this function in other JavaScript file, make sure you specify type attribute to the script tag. Script which use module must be loaded by setting a type module attribute in the script tag. Don't forget to specify this attribute before you're using module in the JavaScript file. otherwise you will get an error message. After you specify your attribute to the script tag, you can use module in the main.js file. To import this function in the main.js file, you can use import keyword. So I will just say import. To import both function, I will say curly braces here and specify sum, comma, multi. So this is my two functions. And I wanted to import these functions from a specific file. So I will just specify from here, and in the double quote I will specify module file name. Now here I just wanted to specify where from I want to import this function. So I will just specify name of my module file in the single or double quote. Keep in mind we had created both these files on the same location. If you create the module file in the folder, then don't forget to specify the absolute file name in the double quote. So we had created this file on the same location, so I will just say dot here, specify / and specify name of my file with extension. So I will just say magic.js, right? And specify semicolon at the end. Now you can use these functions in the main.js file. To use this function, just specify your function name. So we know that the name of my function is sum, and then specify value. So the first argument will be 4, the second is 5, right? So when you execute this file, you will get multiplication and the addition of two numbers, because we had called multiplication function in the sum function, right? You are free to import multiple modules in the same file. So basically, modules are used to create reusable code. Now you can use these modules anywhere in the JavaScript code. You can use namespace as well to import all public items like this. So I will just remove these curly braces from here and just say asterisk as mode. So now you can use this namespace to call any properties and functions from the module. So I will just say mode.sum and specify 4 and 5 here, right? So you can access the sum function using the namespace. You can call the multi functions as well. So I will just say mode multi 5, 6 and just execute this statement, right? So it is very important to use module. That's it. I hope you understand why we need to use modules in the JavaScript and how to use it. In this tutorial, we will understand what is Ajax. Ajax is the most viable-rich internet application technology so far. It is getting tremendous industry momentum and several toolkits and frameworks are emerging. We need to first understand what is Ajax. Ajax is an acronym that stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and it describes a set of development techniques used for building website and web applications. Basically, the use of Ajax is to update web content asynchronously. It means a user web browser doesn't need to reload an entire web page when only a small portion of content on the page need to change. As mentioned above, the J in Ajax stands for JavaScript. It's used specifically to create, add, and manage dynamic website content. In other words, after markup language like HTML and CSS are used to build and display static web features like headers, font, and paragraph, JavaScript is then used to control features that require real-time updates while a visitor is viewing a page. The X in Ajax is XML, which stands for Extensible Markup Language. While HTML and CSS focus on instructing how page content is displayed, like paragraph, headers, font, and colors, XML is used to transfer a data on the web page to the browser that view it. Ajax uses XHTML for content, CSS for representation, along with the document object model and JavaScript for dynamic content display. Ajax is a web browser technology independent of web server software. A user can continue to use the application while the client program requests information from the server in the background. Ajax cannot work independently. It is used in combination with other technologies to create interactive web pages. Now let's understand how Ajax works. Ajax communicates with the server using XML HTTP request object. Now let's understand the flow of Ajax or how Ajax works. So here we have a user browser and the web server. The web user interacts with the browser and requests data from the server. The server will call JavaScript XML HTTP request object. Then the browser will send the HTTP request to the web server. When the web server is interact with the database using server-side languages like PHP, Python, ASP.NET, etc. Using the server-side languages, we will retrieve data from the database. Then this data is sent to the XML HTTP request callback function in XML, JSON or any other format. So when you have data in the callback function, you can display them in the browser. Using the callback function, you can access retrieved data and display on the web page without reloading the complete page. This process is known as AJAX request. Comparing with the standard request, AJAX request is quicker and gets a request very quickly. Now, let's understand how to create AJAX request using XML HTTP object. Let's consider the following example. In this example, we will get the data from the server without reloading the web page. Using the XML HTTP request object, we will get the data from the server. So as you know, data coming from the server will have been kind of any type. So we will just create a mimic of server and get the data from the JSON file, right? So let's get started. So in the Visual Studio Code, we will just create a simple HTML file. So I will just go here and create a simple index.html file. In this file, I will just create a simple HTML5 snippet and just change the title to AJAX. Right? Just after that, in the body section, I will just create a division tag. So I will just say div and specify class container. Right? And in this division tag, I will create h2 heading tag and specify text using XML HTTP request object, right? Just after that, I will just create a button here. So I will just say button, type button and specify a class which is btn. Right? So this is my UI. Just after that, I will just create a script tag here to specify pure JavaScript code. Now here, I just wanted to select my button first. So I will just select btn is equal to document.querySelector to select my button and just specify dot because we are using query selector and say btn because this is a class, right? Just after that, I will just say btn dot add event listener. We will just add click event to this button. So the first parameter is gonna be a click event name and the second parameter is gonna be a handler function. So here I will just say AJAX call. So we need to create this function before we call it, right? So here we will just create this function. So I will just say function AJAX call, right? So we wanted to call this function when we click on this button, right? When we click on this button, we need to call this function, right? Now, so in this function, I will just create instance of the XML HTTP request object, right? So I will just say instance of XML HTTP request object. So I will just create an instance of this object. So I will just say constant x HTTP is equal to new XML HTTP request and specify parentheses because this is a class, right? Now just after that, I just wanted to call the onReadyStateChange property of the XML HTTP request object. The ReadyStateChange property is an event handler that is called whenever the ReadyState attribute is changed. So I will just say x HTTP. I will just call the instance and call the property of on ready state change, right? So this is my property, right? So I will just call the handler function. So I will just say function here, and in this function I just wanted to create the if condition to check the response. So when the state is changed, I will just say if this dot ready state is equal to 4 and this dot status is equal to 200, then we'll execute this if statement, right? So here let me explain what is ready state and the status property of XML HTTP request object. So the ready state property will return 4 when the request is finished and response is ready, and the status property is return 200 means okay when the response is ready, right? So when the request is finished and response is ready, I just wanted to execute this if statement, right? So here I will just say console.log and say this dot response text. So the response text property will get the response from the server, right? But first we need to create a mimic of server response. So we will just create a JSON file to create a mimic of server response. So here I will just create a file. So I will just say response.json, and in this file I will just put some data of the user. So I will just say curly braces and specify first property, which is name. The name is daily tuition. The second property is age is 25. Oops, I will just specify a number, so I will just say 25, and just say city. The location of the channel is USA. And the salary is in $1,000, right? So this is just a mimic of server response. I will just save this file and go to my index.html. So now you will get this response in the response text property, right? So we will just print this response on the console. Just after that, I just wanted to call the XML HTTP request open method to initialize newly created request or an existing one, right? This method is initialize newly created request or existing one, right? So I will just say here xHTTP dot open. On the first argument, I will just specify type of request. So I will just say get here. And on the second argument, I just wanted to specify a URL where we wanted to get the response. So I just wanted to specify a file name here, right? So in the double quote, I will say response.json, right? And just say true here for sync. Just after that, I just wanted to send this request to the browser. Using send method, we will send the request to the browser. So I will just say xHTTP.send, right? So when you execute this example, so I will just right click here and say open with live server. Oops, I just wanted to specify text to my button. So I will just say here get data and just right click here, say inspect and open the console window. Now when you click on the get data, without reloading this page, we will get the data from the server. So I will just click on this get data button, right? So you will get your data without reloading your page. So when you click on this get data button, you will get your response. So now you have a response in JSON format. Now if you wanted to convert this JSON data into object, then you can do that also. So I will just show you how you can do that. So here I will just create a variable. So I will just select data is equal to, and just after that I will call the JSON object, right, and call the method pass. The pass method will convert the JSON data into an object. So I will just specify here this dot response text, right. So this statement will convert the JSON data into JavaScript object. Now I just want to iterate this JavaScript object and print on the console. What I will do is I will just call the for in loop. So I will just say for let keys in data and just say console.log and say here data keys, right, and save my document. So when I click on the get data, you will get your data on the console, right. So without reloading this page, you will get your data from the server. The Ajax technology is very helpful when you are working with the database, right.